it's something that needs to be said. We can't sort of shy away from the uncomfortable truths in our society. Hello, I'm Jareh. I'm an independent curator currently based out of Dakar, and I'm here to do a walkthrough of the Conversations exhibition. So this is actually the first time I've seen a mural by Jade in real life. I've only ever experienced them as documentation. It's just quite powerful to stand in front and actually see this up close in person. Jade is an artist who's been working at the intersection of performance art, drawing, painting practice, and charcoal as a medium is something she uses to almost reclaim spaces. So of course we're in an institutional space, and this is a way of sort of bringing that narrative into spaces that have historically left out Black individuals in terms of representation and in terms of showing Black artists. Nena Kalu is an artist that I deeply admire. Nena's a largely non-verbal artist. For quite a period of time, Nena has been working with repeated drawing, where she continuously uses different pencils, pens, pastels to create these Vortex series. And I've had the privilege of visiting Nena in her studio in South London, which is just so magnetic to watch Nena work, making these intentional decisions as to what color she picks at a particular time and then repeatedly makes these actions on paper. I mean, when I look at the work, it's like I just want to step into the middle of the vortex. It's like it's pulling you into a portal of some possibility that you can't even imagine. Kemi Onabule, a wonderful painter whose palette is sort of richly expressive in terms of use of color in the work. The moon is really a symbol of great importance to a lot of indigenous cultures. The moon is prominent in a lot of folkloric narratives as well, and just cosmology and symbolism, especially in relationship to femininity as well. So I thought it was quite interesting to have the prominence of the moon as a sort of guiding force within the landscape, sort of dreamlike, imaginative landscape that Kemi renders in this painting. Lincolnshire sausages. Olivia's paintings, I think there's certainly this sort of comic strip element to them. You know, there's certainly this idea that it's humorous, but there's nothing humorous in a work that is dealing with reality in the UK of the rise of the far right. It's very political work, commenting specifically on their hometown. They got their first far right MP elected, which for someone like Olivia, and I think a lot of people in the UK, you know, this is quite a distressing reality to think about what that means for people of minority groups who live in this area. And so in this painting, there's a bit of dark humor going on, and Olivia's reimagining, you know, what if she takes all of these supporters of the far right party and, you know, sort of chops them up and turns them into sausages, and then we can eat them and sort of purge them out of society. So I think it's a really sort of interesting take on how an artist is responding to a particular political climate in the UK through humor, but also raising the awareness that, you know, these changes are going to have implications for the BPOC community in the UK, and what does that mean actually if this isn't part of conversation that we're aware of. Khadija Saye, she tragically lost her life in the Grenfell fires that is still ongoing. Nobody has been held accountable. One imagines what her trajectory would have been. To have this legacy of work left behind at such a young age for a new generation and future generations to come to appreciate is really powerful. A series of self-portraits that Khadija was making at the time were drawing on her Gambian British heritage, and also look into this diasporic history as a way of healing and resolving traumas that she had been experiencing in her life. And so there's a lot of symbolism in the work. In the third portrait on the side, there's this sort of horn that she places on the side of her head, form of maybe sort of speaking or communicating with ancestors. Certainly for me, when I engage with Khadijah's work, I often think about, well, what would that continuity have been? Because this work was very much in progress and developing. There's a lot of sadness, there's a lot of appreciation and acknowledgement for the artists that they were becoming, looking at this work. It's bittersweet for me when I engage with Khadijah's photographs and legacies. Groundwork is very much a visualization and a text-based interpretation of protest movements. And rather than thinking certain movements are not related to each other, whether it's about social injustice or environmentalism, these things are interlinked and affect us simultaneously, so we need to pay attention to all of them. It talks about there's an action, but what is the extension? What does that catalyze actually? And we need to pay attention to continuity as opposed to like single moments of actions. What is the legacy of that after the action, after the movement? And how can we think about this communally and collectively as individuals in society? Also, wow, it's a bit of a legend to have in the exhibition. And in this portrait, we have Dorothea Smart, poet, who's been depicted so wonderfully and so enigmatically. There's a lot of symbolism in this portrait that, really sort of speaks to me. The cloth, the sort of woven cloth. I'm not sure the origin of this cloth, but certainly a lot of different African countries, and where my heritage is from, Nigeria, we have cloth similar to that. The wood carving combed in a hand with a mask of a deity, very important. Coral beads around her neck. You can really sort of get a sense of the regality in this portrait, commenting on an art historical representation, particularly in Greek mythology, where the figure is depicted as a white woman. What are the ways to sort of transcend that and also sort of represent Black women, Black creatives in a sort of positive light? There is this sort of history of regality, especially in like the European painting tradition and portraiture as well. But then we, of course, know who is represented in this history. There are barely any Black figures, and even when they are, they're in the back of a frame, depicted as servants, depicted without agency. And yeah, Maud's work completely is a complete rejection of that, actually. Almost saying quite prominently, Black people belong in this history. They've been part of the history of this country for as long as, the United Kingdom existed, and you can't not acknowledge that, particularly in the context of somewhere like Liverpool as well. Ojulowo, I hope I pronounced that properly. It's a series of 4 videos where Evan's exploring the history of music videos and inserting themselves into this, I guess it's, if we're thinking of the 90s and the sort of prominence of music videos, narratives that were being portrayed, some problematic and misogynistic. So what happens if you sort of queer that format and sort of put oneself into it? And also, not to take away from the fact that there's also a technological aspect to this piece. It's on an old cube monitor, thinking about the ways in which ideas were communicated at the time when this sort of medium was prominent. Phoebe Collins-James. So this is quite an interesting configuration that we have. We have a series of clay sculptures that are directly on the floor, so the viewers sort of engaging with them on the floor level. And in this body of work, Phoebe is looking at this idea of the heretic, a sort of a revolutionary figure, a figure who's sort of perhaps unpopular but stands their ground against injustices in the world. One of the really interesting details in the work is the inscriptions on the surface of the sculpture. Scorvitio technique for sort of mark making onto ceramics. This is something that Phoebe introduces a lot into their work. In terms of the history of ceramics and studio pottery in this country, there is a huge gap in terms of representation of artists of color who work in clay. And I think it's really important to sort of probe these histories of different sort of specialisms in art, and I guess this category that we call crafts that ceramics falls under. Conversations is an incredible exhibition. To have everybody share space together is something historical in the context of this country, and just wonderful to see the different associations. Many I hadn't even made before coming to see the exhibition. Really a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to engage with so many Black British women artists and queer artists living in the UK making exciting work.